Year 1242. Borders of the Song Empire, China. The air of the early morning was heavy with the acrid smell of sulfur and charcoal. In the silent courtyard of a Taoist monastery, monks mixed black powders under the flickering light of oil lamps. They sought the secret of immortality, and without realizing it, they were creating its opposite. From that seething cauldron would be born the portable thunder that would change the destiny of war and science itself. The monk Li Tian, alchemist and observer of the stars, recorded the proportions with ritualistic precision. The combination was simple: sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal. But when the flame touched the mixture, the ground trembled. A tongue of fire rose to the sky, tearing through the night. The echo of that explosion was not lost. It crossed centuries and continents. It was the first roar of gunpowder. The emperors, upon hearing of the substance that spat fire, understood something the monks had not foreseen. The power of eternity lay not in the body, but in the mastery of fear. Gunpowder ceased to be magic and became an instrument. The secret, once guarded in alchemy scrolls, would pass into the hands of armies. In that instant, without the world noticing, war discovered science, and science discovered the power to kill en masse. From mystical fire, empires would be born. From the monks' curiosity, cannons, muskets, and thrones would rise. The mountains of Luoyang would remain silent, but their echo would travel to the walls of Constantinople, the ports of Venice, and the deserts of the Ottoman Empire. Humanity, at last, would learn to shape thunder. 13th century, before the artificial fire of gunpowder. The world still breathed in a medieval rhythm. Wars were fought with muscle, iron, and faith. Swords clashed against shields, archers bent wood, and the fate of empires was decided by the weight of the arm, not the precision of science. Kings and sultans trusted more in divine blessings than in experiments. The blood of armies moved in predictable tides, and power was born of courage, not calculation. In Europe, castles rose as fortresses of stone and superstition. In the Crusades, knights fought under banners promising paradise. Fire, until then, was a symbol of purification, not controlled destruction. In the Middle East, alchemists studied the divine breath in metals and minerals, unaware that a simple chemical error could redraw entire borders. In the China of the Song, imperial bureaucracy flourished amid silk and porcelain. They were engineers, astronomers, navigators, but war was still made with spears, catapults, and courage. The empire saw science as a path to harmony, not conquest. The idea of turning knowledge into a weapon seemed almost heresy. However, the Silk Roads, this invisible thread uniting the world, began to pulse with something new. Merchants carried more than spices. They carried rumors. Talk was of a powder that burned like thunder and could hurl stones through the air. An alchemical myth, some said. A sign from the heavens, others claimed. While caravans crossed deserts and monks wrote formulas in silence, the destiny of the world approached a point of no return. War, dormant in iron and honor, was about to awaken in fire and science.
Year 1280, Hubei Province, Imperial China. In a stifling laboratory, a group of military artisans from the Song army tested a new weapon, a bamboo tube reinforced with iron, loaded with the mysterious thunder powder. The experiment seemed more superstition than science, until the moment the fuse was lit. The crack echoed like the roar of a dragon. A ball of fire shot out, cleaving the air, and humanity's first rudimentary cannon came to life. gunpowder ceased to be an alchemistical curiosity and became a tool of power. Troops began adapting the mixture into incendiary arrows, clay grenades, and rudimentary rockets. The enemies on the northern borders, the Mongols, would soon prove its effectiveness. The horse archers, masters of the plains, found themselves for the first time facing a force that neither courage nor speed could contain: bottled thunder. The fire spread not only across walls, but also through the human imagination. The spark crossed borders, carried by trade routes, traveling monks, and well-paid traders. The Chinese secret, guarded for centuries, began to slip through silken fingers. In the West, Arab alchemists deciphered fragments of the formulas, blending them with knowledge from Alexandria and Damascus. Soon, in the workshops of Baghdad and Cairo, vials exploded under curious hands. The same fire that illuminated rituals now illuminated battlefields. Humanity had unknowingly lit the fuse of a new era. Science began to serve destruction, and the destiny of empires would be rewritten in smoke and iron.
Year 1299. The borders of the known world trembled. Messengers carried news that seemed like legends. In the east, it was said that the Chinese controlled the fire of the heavens. In the west, rumors of weapons that spat lightning reached courts with the force of astonishment. Kings and sultans listened and trembled. What had once been a secret of monks and engineers now became the most feared whisper along the Silk Roads. In Damascus, the alchemists of Sultan Ayub tested the new powder in siege weapons. When the fuse ignited, the wooden gate dissolved into ashes. The Sultan, dumbfounded, declared, "Fire obeys man." And in that instant, war would never be silent again. In Europe, Crusader knights reported seeing flaming arrows that flew with the roar of dragons. Copyist monks began translating fragments of Arab manuscripts. Knowledge, at last, escaped all vaults. The sound of artificial thunder became the anthem of the new era. The old orders of knights panicked. Their armor, which for centuries had protected kings and empires, now became useless before a simple tube of iron and fire. The first European inventors of gunpowder, Roger Bacon among them, recorded warnings in their manuscripts. "This power," he wrote, "is so great that if used without wisdom, it will destroy entire cities." No one listened. Fascination overcame fear. Princes wanted cannons, merchants wanted profits, and common men, between terror and awe, wanted to see the fire dance once more. Subscribe to continue this journey. The birth of the Gunpowder Empires is just beginning. 14th century, the workshops of the world seethe. In the dimness of medieval cities, blacksmiths and alchemists became engineers of destruction. The sound of hammers replaced the chanting of monasteries. Iron tubes, gunpowder, and stone spheres were tested in hidden courtyards where error meant death. Man, for the first time, was learning to design chaos. In Florence, Venice, and Genoa, merchants funded secret experiments. Each republic wanted its own Bacca di Fuoco, a cannon capable of toppling walls in seconds. On the Iberian Peninsula, Moorish engineers refined the same principle with mathematical precision. Iron, saltpeter, and fire became the sacred trinity of the new power. Meanwhile, the Mongol Empire, which already dominated half the world, began adapting gunpowder to its mobile sieges. Incendiary arrows flew like comets, and once impenetrable fortresses crumbled under the blast. The Mongols would carry this secret to Persia, and from there to the gates of Europe. The ancient codes of war, honor, bravery, duel, began to vanish. The new battlefield demanded not courage, but calculation. Science, once a guide to knowledge, now descended into hell, with hands stained in soot. Each shot was an experiment, each death a refined formula. Gunpowder, in its brutal simplicity, became a universal language, understood by all peoples, spoken in all wars.
and the deeper men dove, the more the abyss gazed back, illuminated by flashes of fire and black smoke. 15th century. Between secrets of state and hidden laboratories, gunpowder was no longer a mystery, it was a currency of power. Each empire treated its formulas as divine relics. In palaces, engineers were kept under surveillance, their workshops guarded by spies and rival alchemists. Knowledge had become a political weapon. In Constantinople, Sultan Mehmed II, the Conqueror, kept the Hungarian engineer Orban under his protection, a visionary who promised to forge the greatest cannon on earth. In the palace cellars, barrels of gunpowder and bronze molds accumulated, guarded by janissaries who swore silence. The basilisk, as it would be called, would change the destiny of an empire and an era. Meanwhile, in Italian cities, the science of destruction became art. Mathematicians calculated angles, architects redesigned walls to withstand cannon fire. Modern military engineering was born directly from fear. Leonardo da Vinci, with his sketchbooks covered in charcoal and metal, already dreamed of flying machines and automatic firearms. The future seethed within the workshops. In Christian kingdoms, the church viewed the advance of military technology with suspicion. Human thunder seemed to rival divine thunder. Preachers warned, armed science is the harbinger of the end. But kings, thirsting for supremacy, ignored the sermon. The world was divided between faith and calculation, between cross and canon. Behind the scenes, science ceased to be a quest for knowledge and became the perfect instrument of domination. Each laboratory was a forge of empires. Each secret, a future war.
Year 1453. Constantinople, the last bastion of Rome. Dawn over the Bosporus brought a heavy silence. On the hills, Ottoman forces prepared for the final assault. At the forefront rose bronze monsters, Orban's great cannons, fueled by tons of gunpowder. When Sultan Mehmed II raised his hand, the ancient world awaited its sentence. The shot echoed like the roar of an enraged god. The Theodosian wall, which had withstood 1,000 years of armies and storms, shattered into stone and fire. The skies darkened with smoke, and the sound of human thunder crossed continents. It was the birth of the modern era of war. For 40 days, the siege continued. Each explosion tore a piece from history. When Constantinople finally fell, it was not just a city that succumbed. It was the very symbol of the medieval world. The power of firearms had destroyed the last echo of the Roman Empire. Messengers raced in all directions with the news. In the courts of Europe, fear grew like a wildfire. If the walls of Constantinople had crumbled, what could resist? Kings demanded their own cannons, foundries worked day and night, and the secret of gunpowder ceased to be a secret. Humanity had crossed the point of no return. The science of destruction gained a soul of its own. The sound of bells in cathedrals began to mingle with the blast of iron, and no one would know anymore where faith ended and fire began. Thunder had become sovereign. Second half of the 15th century. The sound of cannons traverses the world. The walls that once protected empires became traps. Medieval fortresses, with their elegant towers and imposing gates, were now vulnerable to the power of fire. From Constantinople to Naples, from Granada to Delhi, the same sound echoed, the thunder of gunpowder. On the Iberian Peninsula, the siege of Granada marked the end of Moorish presence in Europe. The Catholic monarchies, Isabella and Ferdinand, commanded troops armed with cast-iron cannons. Ancient Islamic fortresses, once impenetrable, crumbled under European fire. The Reconquista ended not by the cross, but by chemistry. At the same time, in the valleys of the Ganges, Mughal Prince Babur tested new weapons brought from the Ottomans. With his zamburaks, small cannons mounted on camels, he paved the way to found the Mughal Empire.
Thus, the same principle that had toppled Constantinople now forged new thrones on the other side of the world. In Venice, the arsenals roared like metallic hearts. The Maritime Republic, fearing Ottoman expansion, invested in mass production of muskets and naval artillery. It was the dawn of the arms industry, the definitive marriage of science, commerce, and blood. For the first time, war became a global experiment. Each battle was a laboratory, each empire a student of destruction. Chroniclers of the era wrote in awe, "The thunder of men rivals the thunder of God." And as cities adapted to the new sound of power, a truth emerged from the ruins. The fear had become the universal language. 16th and 17th centuries, the entire world in flames. Gunpowder had become the new blood of civilization. Europe, Asia, Africa, and the New World boiled under the same blaze of fire. The Gunpowder Empires had been born. 3 colossi rose over smoke and iron: Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals. Each dominated the secret of scientific destruction, transforming war into engineering. On the walls of Chaldiran in 1514, Ottoman Sultan Selim I faced Persian Shah Ismail. It was the first decisive clash between science-driven armies. On one side, faith and cavalry. On the other, cannons and muskets. When the field covered in smoke, the era of mystical warriors ended. Fire had defeated fervor. In Europe, kingdoms devoured each other in equally infernal battles. Charles V's cannons thundered over France, while Spanish tercios dominated the continent with mechanical discipline. The Renaissance flourished in palaces, but died on battlefields. Art and death were now sisters. On the seas, galleons armed with rows of cannons turned the ocean into a proving ground. Portugal and Spain drew their empires with iron and gunpowder. Each new colony was conquered amid a deafening discharge. War at last became industrial before industry existed. Science had been definitively corrupted by power, and humanity celebrated progress without seeing the abyss ahead. Thunder was universal, fear global, and no wall, neither of stone nor faith, would resist human calculation any longer.
17th century, the world bends under the weight of its own thunder. The Gunpowder Empires, born from scientific brilliance, began to wither from the same fire that raised them. Armies became machines of incessant expenditure: iron, gunpowder, blood, and taxes. Cities, once proud, began to crumble under the burden of endless war. In the Balkans, the Ottoman Empire stagnated. The ranks of janissaries now fought against time itself. Discipline dissolved, coffers emptied, and the sound of cannons became a melancholic echo of ancient glory. In Western Europe, religious wars devastated entire fields. The 30 Years' War turned the continent into a cemetery of smoke and mud. Science, which once promised power, now served ruin. Alchemists of the past had dreamed of gold. Modern kings found only ashes. In the ports of Lisbon and Seville, galleons returned battered from the colonies. The trade in gunpowder, iron, and slaves sustained entire kingdoms. But each shipment also brought rumors of revolts, mutinies, and storms. Fire no longer fully obeyed man. Meanwhile, in the underbelly of history, a new kind of thinker was born. Men like Galileo and Bacon, who saw in experiment not a weapon but a method. Science began, slowly, to free itself from the canon and seek the heavens once more. But the price had been paid. Humanity had learned to shape thunder, and now paid for its arrogance. The world entered ruins, and the echo of explosions became the lament of the empires themselves. 18th century. After the thunder, silence. The sound of cannons that once heralded the power of empires now dissipated like dust over destroyed cities. The world awoke from a dream made of fire. Walls lay in pieces, kings impoverished, fields burned. Gunpowder had changed the earth and left deep scars upon it. In Vienna, Paris, and Istanbul, scholars began to ask, was it knowledge that elevated us or burned us? Universities, heirs to ancient war laboratories, now turned to reason. Alchemists became scientists, and the metal of cannons transformed into instruments of observation. The same bronze that once tore walls now cast telescopes. In the ports, sailors brought stories from the New World, where the same weapons that had toppled walls now subjugated entire peoples. European fire had crossed oceans. Tribes, civilizations, and entire cultures dissolved under the smoke of progress. The thunder of gunpowder at last was global. But after each conquest, the same void, the smell of sulfur, the silence of squares, the empty gaze of survivors. The century of lights was born on dark ground. Science, freeing itself from the yoke of war, carried within it an ancestral guilt, the weight of having set the world ablaze to learn to control it. And in the ruins of the Gunpowder Empires, philosophers began to perceive something new, that absolute power lay not in weapons, but in the knowledge that created them. The ashes of ancient fire would fertilize the soil of revolution, political, scientific, and spiritual. Thunder had fallen silent, but its echo still vibrated in the human heart. 18th century, the rebirth amid ruins. Cities rebuilt slowly, and humanity looked back in astonishment. The fire of gunpowder had shaped the map of the world, but also taught that no empire is eternal. From the collapse of kingdoms emerged a new force, that of reason. Academies replaced arsenals. Men like Newton, Boyle, and Lavoisier deciphered the invisible laws of the universe. The same impulse that once led Chinese monks to mix saltpeter and sulfur now sought to understand the cosmos. Science, once slave to war, began to dream of the infinite. But the legacy of gunpowder had not vanished. In silent arsenals, engineers studied ways to make fire more precise, more lethal, more controlled. Artillery became exact science, the cannon an instrument of applied geometry. Destruction had become discipline. Meanwhile, in the colonies of the New World, the same black powder ignited revolutions. The shots that echoed in Lexington and Valmy carried not only gunpowder but ideas. The spark that once ignited walls now ignited consciences. Gunpowder liberated as much as it enslaved. The century of lights rose upon the fire of darkness. And though humanity believed it had mastered science, the truth was inverse. Fire still guided it, silently in every discovery and every ambition. Remained fragmented empires, redrawn maps, and a new kind of power, systematic knowledge, mechanical reasoning, infinite curiosity. From thunder, the echo remained. From chaos, the method remained. And from the ruins of gunpowder was born the modern world.
19th century. Fire finally reveals its soul. Behind the glory of empires and the smoke of battles, the secret of gunpowder was not merely chemical, it was philosophical. Humanity had discovered, unknowingly, the power of replication, the ability to turn a spark into collective, predictable, measurable force. Gunpowder was the first algorithm of dominion. The scientists of the 19th century, heirs to alchemists and gunners, understood this clearly. When Alfred Nobel isolated the principle of nitroglycerin and created dynamite, he believed he was serving engineering and peace. But like all before him, he was betrayed by human nature. His invention raised bridges and also trenches. Science once more showed its ambiguity. It illuminated and ignited. While academies celebrated progress, the underbelly of factories buzzed with the new industrial alchemy. Repeating arms, howitzers, precision projectiles, all direct descendants of the black powder of Chinese monks. The secret of gunpowder was simple. Man had learned to control destruction, and therefore to desire more of it.
But there was another, deeper secret that few saw. Science did not merely serve war. War served science. Arsenals funded observatories, armies propelled chemistry, and generals, unknowingly, sponsored the birth of modern physics. Gunpowder, which began as a mystical error, had become the invisible engine of modernity. The alchemical fire of ancient temples now burned in locomotives, engines, and laboratories. The revealed secret was this: war had birthed progress. 15th to 19th centuries, echoes of those who saw fire born. The surviving scrolls and diaries tell more than battles. They reveal human awe before its own power. The monk Li Tian, in Taoist chronicles, wrote before dying, "I sought the flame of eternal life and found instant death." The formula was pure, the men not. His manuscripts, preserved in temples of the Song dynasty, became relics of warning, not glory. Centuries later, the Hungarian engineer Orban, creator of the Constantinople cannons, left a note in Latin: "The sound of my work is the sound of falling eras." He did not live to see the empire he helped found turn to ruins. In his notes, Leonardo da Vinci reflected, "Iron, when heated by gunpowder, moves like thunder, and man who created it moves against himself." Even in his genius, there was fear of the abyss that reason opened. In the following centuries, soldiers of all banners would repeat the same lament in different tongues. "We do not know why we fight, only how to do it." And when Alfred Nobel read his own premature obituary, calling him the merchant of death, he wrote to humanity in silence, creating the Nobel Peace Prize, his attempt to redeem the fire he himself had unleashed. These voices, lost among scrolls and gunpowder, still murmur beneath the dust of museums and the steel of factories. They are the testimony of an eternal truth. Man never forgets the sound of his first thunder. 19th and 20th centuries, from the smoke of cannons to the gleam of factories. The gunpowder revolution had ended, but its legacy ignited a new kind of war, the industrial one. The same chemical principle that powered weapons now powered locomotives, engines, and mining explosives. The fire of destruction had become the engine of progress. Factories rose where walls once stood. Iron, once molded into cannons, now became bridges and rails. But the echo of war persisted within the gears. Nations measured their strength no longer by faith, but by production of gunpowder, coal, and steel. The science born in trenches had become the soul of industry. On the fields of Crimea, Prussia, and America, new repeating arms and mobile artillery showed what man had learned from centuries of experimentation. Combat had become pure mathematics. Gunpowder, now refined, was the invisible breath behind modernity, moving empires, revolutions, and machines. When the 20th century dawned, the same logic of fire guided new formulas: nitrocellulose, cordite, TNT, and after them would come uranium. The thunder that began with Chinese monks became cosmic. The world had changed forever. Nations raised flags over fire, but none knew how to extinguish it. Gunpowder had given birth to science, industry, and modern fear. Man had finally mastered thunder, but discovered that thunder also mastered him. From cannon to engine, from saltpeter to atom, the line was continuous, and the world, though illuminated, carried the glare of ancient explosions.
20th and 21st centuries. The invisible thunder. Gunpowder vanished from battles, but its spirit remains in all forms of power. The fire of Chinese monks became the same that propels rockets, engines, and nuclear explosions. The echo of the first spark still resonates in the hearts of machines orbiting the sky and in weapons slumbering beneath the earth. The modern world lives to the sound of disguised thunder. In factories, the snap of production lines is merely the industrial rhythm of the old cannon. In laboratories, scientists calculate energy and matter with the same reverence alchemists measured saltpeter and sulfur. The principle has not changed, only the reach. Every atomic explosion, every launched rocket, every mine opened in search of resources is a silent reminder. Man continues serving the force he created. From gunpowder to atom, the human trajectory is a spiral of fire and knowledge, invention and regret. In museums, rusted cannons rest like bones of an extinct species. But on screens, in newsreels, and in invisible wars of information, the sound of thunder still reverberates. Now it is digital, instantaneous, global. The echo of gunpowder has become the pulse of the world, the hidden rhythm that drives politics, technology, and fear. Even in peace, man hears the distant sound of an ancestral shot, and perhaps, in some laboratory, another modern alchemist is mixing substances in search of eternity, unaware that he repeats the same gesture, the same error, the same fire. Thunder has never been extinguished. It has only changed tone. 21st century, the reflection of fire in human eyes. The history of gunpowder is not merely the chronicle of war, it is the mirror of the human mind. Every explosion, in every era, revealed the same instinct to dominate, understand, surpass, and at the same time, to destroy. The spark that drives science is the same that consumes the soul. Man believed he could control fire, but fire always led him. Gunpowder taught trajectories to calculate, distances to measure, the physics of combustion to comprehend, and thus opened the way to astronomy, chemistry, and the space age. But in its essence, it was a cruel master. It showed that knowledge without ethics is merely another form of gunpowder. The Gunpowder Empires crumbled, but the mentality that raised them lives on in corporations, governments, and silicon machines. Today, power is measured not in tons of iron, but in terabytes, algorithms, and nuclear energy. War has become invisible, and yet it remains the same. The invisible lessons of gunpowder are simple and terrible. Every discovery has a cost. Every spark demands a sacrifice, and every weapon is born from the same impulse that moves the artist, the scientist, and the dreamer. The desire to create something that transcends its creator.
Gunpowder revealed the best and worst of man. Knowledge without compassion is merely fire without light. And as long as there is curiosity without conscience, thunder will continue to echo within machines, borders, and the human heart. Year 2025, Earth. The sound of thunder still vibrates. The man who sought immortality in the mountains of China created, unknowingly, the eternity of destruction. From that handful of black powder were born empires, ruins, and constellations of knowledge. Gunpowder was the first breath of science that roared, the first pact between curiosity and power, and the world never returned to silence. Today, cannons rest, but their heirs roar in other forms: rockets, engines, circuits, data. The same principle that lit the fuse of the first bamboo tube now ignites the artificial stars of the space age. The fire that toppled walls now propels probes beyond Mars. Gunpowder did not die, it evolved. But beneath the gleam of satellites and screens, the same dilemma persists. Humanity remains divided between creating and destroying, between illuminating and burning. Fire remains within man, awaiting command, awaiting purpose. And perhaps the true triumph of science is not mastery of fire, but the awareness that it never belonged to us. The thunder of gunpowder echoes not as a memory of war, but as a warning. Every spark, every formula, every discovery carries within it the destiny of all empires. From the ashes of monks to the gleam of modern laboratories, the cycle is complete. War discovered science. Science discovered the universe. And man discovered himself reflected in the glare of his own fire.